The era of the movie remake seems to have, in large part, kind of died down a little bit in recent years. But in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, what major franchise or popular movie are they going to revisit at some point in the future and totally remake, even though they shouldn't even touch it at all, right? It's the sort of movie that's super popular, that's come to define cinema as we know it. And so inevitably, you have to imagine that some studios are going to look at it, or some executives are going to look at it and think, we can sort of reshape this for a modern audience and cash in on that. And so what I wanted to do today was just talk about a handful of movies that I hope are never remade. And in all likelihood, they probably won't be, but at the same time, never say never, right? I mean, you look at things like Psycho, and that had a remake. I believe it was around the year 2000 or so. It was awful. It's probably, I think, one of the worst remakes, and I think it's regarded as one of the worst remakes pretty widely by most people. You had the remake of Total Recall starring Colin Farrell, which was, okay and kind of entertaining in its own right, but of course nowhere near on the same level as the original Total Recall. But anyway, let's talk about a couple different movies here, and again, five in total that I think should never be remade under any circumstances. So we'll start with the most obvious one, and that's the original Star Wars, and really Star Wars as a whole. I don't think they should ever remake any of those movies, but I could absolutely see, let's just say in the year 2077, right, the 100-year anniversary of the original film, A New Hope, I could totally see Disney, which I assume will still be a thing at that time, looking at that property, if it's died down in any capacity by then, and saying, this is an opportunity for us to totally re-envision this and revisit the whole thing from scratch. Well, not from scratch, but based on the original film, and try to sort of, make it a contemporary thing again, or make it sort of modern, quote unquote. It would be completely awful, in my opinion. They should never do that. But again, I wouldn't put it past some executive to sort of look at that and, make that a thing. Now, I don't know what kind of stipulations were in the sale of, Lucasfilm to Disney. I mean, maybe they had some sort of clause in there that said you can never remake any of these movies. I doubt that's the case. And hopefully, the good people at Disney, are smart enough to understand that a lot of people would just sort of instantly rebel against that. But again, it's one of those things where you never say never, and I just hope that Star Wars, in any capacity, is never remade. Another movie that I think should never be remade is Back to the Future, and that's really for the whole franchise, but especially the first film. I think that Robert Zemeckis has said in so many words over the years, over his dead body, will it be remade? So I really don't think that will ever happen. But again, that's even, in my mind, a more likely candidate for a remake than something like Star Wars, because you could easily sort of update that, because it's got as its protagonist a teenager. You could sort of, cast somebody young in that role, right? Someone who's popular at that time, whatever that could be. You could have a new car in the role, or in the sort of main mechanism, right, for getting Doc Brown, whoever that would end up being, and Marty into the past and everywhere they need to go in that series of movies. So there's a lot of different ways they could remake that, but again, it would just be total blasphemy if they decided to do it, and hopefully that never will happen. But to me, that's actually, again, a more likely candidate for a remake, but I think it would be decades down the road, no pun intended, right? We're talking about Back to the Future here, before it actually became a thing, but hopefully that one is just off the table and never happens. Another movie that I would absolutely hate to see be remade is Jaws. To me, it's one of the top 5 movies of all time. It's one of my favorite movies. I think it's just brilliantly done from start to finish. That, to me, is a perfect movie, pretty much. I don't really see anything there that's a flaw. It's a masterpiece from Spielberg. But again, that's another movie that I could see being remade, especially as the shark movie or the shark film, maybe gains some kind of resurgence as the years go on. We're sort of beyond that, but I mean, this is the movie that really created the summer blockbuster, right? That's what sort of pinpointed and identified in sort of movie lore as the film that kicked all of that off and made that idea a thing. So again, I could see it being remade. I hope that never happens, but again, never say never. You never know. It would be totally awful. You're never going to have people like Roy Schneider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss in those roles, and to capture that same sort of humanity, I think, that really defines the original movie. So hopefully that one's another one that's just off the table. Another movie that I really, really hope is never remade is Alien. I think the original Alien is a masterpiece of science fiction and horror. I could see it being remade because the original is kind of quirky, and I think as the decades go by, it can be a little less accessible for more contemporary audiences, but who cares? It's a great movie. It's, again, a masterpiece in its own right. I could see the alien being totally redesigned, as sort of the brainchild of some again, studio executives somewhere down the road, but hopefully that never does become a thing. But they should completely leave Alien alone. And really, the franchise as it is sort of petering out a little bit. So I don't know how much of an incentive there would be to remake that anyway. I'm not sure how popular it is these days, but I still love Alien, and I think there is some talk about making Alien into a show or sort of a sequel show at some point, maybe for a streaming service or for FX, I think is what I've seen. But anyway, please don't ever remake Alien. Just leave it alone. It's a masterpiece movie. Just leave it as is. The last movie on this list, and again, this is really kind of an endless list, right? I mean, there are a lot of classic movies that I would never want to see be remade, but these are some of my favorites and some that, again, were really popular and generated a lot of box office revenue, making them good candidates. Jurassic Park, the original Jurassic Park. Now, we're coming up to the end of the Lost World trilogy, or not the Lost World, Jurassic World. I'm getting my movies confused here, but we're coming up to the end of the Jurassic World trilogy with Jurassic World Dominion, which is coming out soon-ish, I believe. So they're going to tie that up, and so you can see as time goes on, they sort of let Jurassic Park sit there for a while and then decide, you know what, we could remake this because CGI's gotten so much better. But the thing about Jurassic Park is, again, it's Spielberg, but it's got great character development, it's got a great story, and it really pioneered the use of CGI as kind of a mainstream thing in cinema. So it's sort of the yin and yang, I guess, to Jaws in that sense, that it popularized CGI as a thing and showed what it really could do. But the great thing about it is the CGI still holds up, right? I mean, it still looks really good because they used it sparingly and in conjunction with animatronics to make it look great. But the original Jurassic Park, again, is one of those movies I could see somebody revisiting down the line because it is kind of a cash cow, and they would want to try and, make it contemporary or make it modern for audiences whenever that would be. But again, please, 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 whoever's watching this, if anybody at some point, decades down the road, just leave it alone, please, for everybody's sake. Anyway, those are 5 popular movies that I hope are never remade. If you have your own list or other suggestions, and again, this could be an endless list, let me know in the comments below. Let's have some discussion about this. And as always, thanks for watching.